So today I want to talk about a core aspect of any MMO, leveling and progression. Progression is the idea that your character becomes more powerful as time goes on. It's important to have some sense of progression or a game will feel stale fairly quickly. Progression is what keeps people interested in the game. The most basic approach to keep people playing is by waving the proverbial carrot on a stick in front of them. Let's take a look at a game that does this well, World of Warcraft. Now in WoW, while you're leveling up, every so often you get a new ability. This idea of getting something completely new is what will inspire you to continue leveling up. And then once you're max level, it becomes a gear grind. That is, your sense of progression comes from obtaining new pieces of gear and having small advances in your overall power level because of it. Now this works really well and is one of the reasons why World of Warcraft has continued for so long, but it's not without its problems. I asked last time for some people's thoughts about different aspects of the game. A hobo said, "Leveling sucks, I don't want to put in a month to get to in-game." And I totally agree. See, the problem with systems like WoW is that the in-game gear grind feels like the actual game, and leveling just feels like a chore that you're forced to do before you can play the real game. It often feels like nothing you do while leveling matters, and you can't do these activities that matter until you hit max level. Now there are some games that have a way around this. For example, Runescape. Runescape is a game where you don't need to be max level to do in-game content. There's content spaced throughout the leveling process. Leveling becomes less of a thing that you feel like you have to do and more of a personal goal. It's not necessary to have maxed out stats to do most of the content. But that system also has problems. Basically, because you can access content before you are max level, leveling itself becomes less exciting. You don't have as much to look forward to by leveling. The other problem is that it creates dead content. No one is going to go back and do level 60 content when level 70 content is so much more rewarding. By using World of Warcraft's method of basically having all the content at one end, it ensures as many players as possible are doing that content. So how do we overcome these things? Well, Guild Wars 2 tried to overcome it by having a world that scales you to the zone's level and having drops always be appropriate for whatever level you actually were. By doing this, it basically allows you to play with friends and do lower level content while still progressing. Overall, this is actually a pretty good system, but it has one major flaw. It makes leveling basically not matter, but the idea of leveling still exists. So you're stuck leveling up, but you aren't really gaining anything from leveling up. This makes leveling extremely boring and grindy, and since everything scales with your level, the question becomes, why have a leveling mechanic in the first place? And this is where my idea for the perfect MMO comes in. Basically cut out the leveling process entirely. It's just not necessary. Leveling in games only gives an artificial sense of progression anyway. Basically, when you level up, you move onto a new area with monsters that are your level. You're never actually gaining anything because as you get more powerful, so do the monsters around you. So by cutting out the leveling process and just allowing players to access those in-game activities from the start, you're allowing them the freedom to play the real game as soon as they log in. So what is the real game in this instance? Well, it would be something like World of Warcraft's gear grind. Basically, you aren't gaining levels, but there is still a sense of progression from getting better and better pieces of gear. Activities wouldn't be locked by requiring you to be a certain level, but instead by how difficult they were, thereby requiring you to have better gear to access them. Zones would be the same way. All areas of the game would be accessible from the very start. However, some zones would have more difficult enemies in them, that instead of requiring you to be a certain level, more require you to have a certain level of gear to defeat them. And by having this no-level system, basically it opens up the world from the other end too. Not only are low-geared people allowed into higher areas, but higher-geared players are going to be in lower-level areas. The whole world is going to be more active. There would maybe be some high-level resources like mining nodes spread out around in every zone, and this would give players of all gear levels incentive to explore the world to find them. And this creates a living world full of players. And there could still be other ways to progress your character. For example, there could be quests that you need to do to unlock certain abilities or gain access to certain areas. And speaking of quests, if there's no leveling system, then you wouldn't really be stuck at these quest hubs doing a bunch of menial tasks. Instead, quests could be these big epic adventures that take you all around the world, which, remember, isn't level locked. This could also be done with crafting and gathering skills. You maybe don't exactly level up the skills, but you progress with them in other ways. For basic beginner items, you could simply craft them at a crafting table in a city. But for higher tier items, maybe you need to do a quest to unlock how to make them. Or just creating an item might be a quest in itself. Think of how cool it would be that instead of just making something at a bench, you need to travel around the world and take part in different sorts of activities. For example, first you have to gather rare ores from around the world and certain drops from monsters. Then those need to be forged with the fire of a dragon, which requires you to fight a dragon. Then you need to head to the sacred crafting bench on top of a mountain and hammer it into the right shape. Finally, it needs to be quenched in some magical lake, which is also guarded by monsters. And that's how you create an immortal fire sword of Rekoth. And personally, I feel like all of that is way more interesting than gathering 6,000 iron ore and then hammering out 1,000 iron swords at a smithing bench to level up your smithing. So I firmly believe that the ideal MMO just wouldn't have a leveling system, and instead all progression would be through gear and quests and personal achievements. Now I really want to hear your thoughts about this, so leave them in the comments. Also, I still want to hear about your thoughts for other aspects of the perfect MMO, and if I like your comment, I might feature it in future videos. So thanks for watching. I'm Kothorix, and you have a wonderful day.